Hey friends, so today we're going to be talking about email safety in general, and I'm going to share with you a setup that can help protect you no matter what kind of email provider you're using. We're looking at Thunderbird right now, and we're looking at my I2P mail, my SUSE mail address right up at the top here, so this is my setup for that, but you don't need to use these tips for just I2P mail. You should implement them for all your emails if you want more anonymity, privacy, and security. This is something everyone should watch the entire video on, as I'm going to be talking about things I haven't heard talked about by others, and I wanted to share these things with you guys because my priority here is sharing unique and interesting tutorials that I think can benefit everyone. And I have a public blog you can check out as well for more written tutorials, which I have there. I also have a top tutorials post, so you can check out this privacy guide I created. And recently I also talked about, so you'll notice there are some posts that are for members, but a lot of times that concerns personal information that I don't necessarily want to share with the world. Sometimes there'll be an early release to people who support this, and then I'll make it public later on. So recently we talked about cubes and Unix disposable virtual machines. So that was something that was concerning email. And before that, we also talked about I2P mail or SUSE mail, I2P. And you can search all the posts by category. You can just simply click on the category and see all the posts by that. So it's a great way to find what you're looking for, is checking out the blog. I have the videos posted on posts there, and I also have written tutorials that aren't even on video. So we could take a look at my recent I2P tutorials. I also went through how to set up I2P mail. But like I said, this video isn't just for I2P mail. And I do encourage you to watch the whole thing because I'm going to have several tips today in this unique video. And I do encourage you, share it with other people. I put a lot of work into coming out with original tutorials to share with you guys, and I share a lot of my personal practices as well. And you don't need to be using Unix or cubes to follow this. This is for everyone. Some people are going to use Tails, some people are going to use cubes, some people are going to use Unix, some people are going to use Prestium, another option. If you're looking to try I2P, Prestium is an operating system I did cover recently this year. This post went into safety and spear phishing, how most of us eventually are going to be targeted at some time or another with spear phishing attacks. Now, a spear phishing attack is going to be something where someone gathers information on you, and in fact, I may do a tutorial just demonstrating some of those tips, so how someone may gather your email addresses from your business or otherwise, and then they could potentially target you or people that are close to you by crafting emails that you will want to open. Possibly you're looking for some kind of tip or reward, or you're a journalist, you're looking for some kind of source. They may share malicious files with you. That's a spear phishing attack. Or maybe you'll get what looks like a chain letter from your family, but their device may have been compromised, scraped their contact list, and then formulated a chainmail looking email to you, so that it gives the semblance of legitimacy where you think you're just getting a chainmail from someone in your family, and it even shows the previous recipients, so it adds more authenticity by doing so. So there's a lot of tricks out there that they'll use to try and fool you into opening it. A lot of times it'll be financially related or something you think is so important. If you don't open it, you may run into some kind of trouble financially or otherwise. So there's a lot of techniques out there for spear phishing, and you're likely to be attacked in one way or another down the line by a spear phishing attack. And there's numerous types of attacks by email where it doesn't necessarily have to be a file. It could be remotely loading content. That's another thing. So we're going to go over Thunderbird first and just talk about that. And then we're going to go into some default settings that you'll want to set no matter what your email provider is. So here's Thunderbird, and if you followed my tutorial or if you use any email account in Thunderbird, I highly recommend to ensure you have remote content loading turned off. That's something pretty important. So you want to ensure that there's no remote content loading, and that's another key thing that you'll want to have. But first and foremost, so see right here, search results. If you search for remote, ensure this is not checked off, because you don't want your emails loading remote content. Imagine if you connect directly to the internet and remote content is loaded. That means your device is going to be connecting out to those servers, possibly controlled by a malicious party, possibly planting something in your computer to track you on the internet. So ensure this is unchecked, and also I want to cover some other tips as well. So even if you followed my I2P mail tutorial, it's important to make some changes to your Thunderbird default settings. And this wasn't something I got to cover in the first video, so I wanted to talk about it today. So what you'll want to do is make sure your connection is proxied through Tor. And you might think, well, maybe this is going to interfere with my I2P mail if you have I2P mail set up. Well, it doesn't matter what you have set up. If you have a connection and it has to make a connection regardless of what it needs to connect for, you want to ensure that it is not your home network connecting. And this is going to ensure your privacy and potentially your safety online. So we go into settings here and we open it and make sure no matter what your email is, even if it's I2P mail, which uses a whole different network, but you still want to ensure that Thunderbird is not making direct connections. So you'll want to go to manual proxy configuration and set the SOCKS host to SOCKS 5 local host and then 9050 for the port. And that's going to ensure everything is routed through Tor. If it's not, you know, your standard email and it's something malicious, you want to ensure, even if it does load remote content, that you're going to ensure that you are going through the Tor network for that. And make sure to do this as well, proxy DNS when using SOCKS 5. That's really important. What that does is it allows the exit node itself to perform the DNS lookups. So it's not your machine doing DNS lookups, leaking out information. It's instead using that exit node. And then you're going to hit OK. And at that point, Thunderbird should be using the Tor connection. Now, if you haven't done so already, you're going to want to make sure you start and install Tor for that proxy setting. So if you are on an Arch-based system, say Endeavor OS, or if you're on something like Artix or even Arch itself or Manjaro, you can install Tor by using pacman S Tor, and it'll install Tor. If you're on a Debian-based system, you're going to do apt install Tor, use the Y flag to automate answering yes to install. That'll save you an enter key as well. So once you install Tor, you'll want to make sure it's started. So you'll do sudo system control start Tor, and that's going to start the Tor process. Give it a minute or two, and that will give it time to fully connect to the Tor network. Then you'll make sure you have your connection settings in Thunderbird to use manual proxy configuration and then have it to 9050 on local host. That won't interfere with your I2P mail, so keep that part in mind. Your I2P mail, the I2P connection here in I2P mail is for sending and receiving your mail. It also uses local host. And the thing about proxy settings is it doesn't affect your local host connection. So in your connection settings, you'll also notice it says does not affect the local LAN or the local host settings. So it doesn't affect your I2P mail in a negative way. It only enhances the protection you have. And even if you're not using I2P mail, that's another thing. You may get a link on your email. You want to ensure that your link is going to use another browser. You may be wondering, well, if I click on this, what's going to happen? Well, it may reveal your IP address. So even if you have an anonymous or what you think is an anonymous email account, you will want to ensure that it's not going to open in a direct connecting browser. And so what are we going to do there? Well, we're going to go ahead and change our default settings. We're going to open our settings manager on Linux. You can do the same in Windows. It may be called something different. Then what we're going to do is look up app, and we're going to go to default applications. And when you do that, you're going to want to make sure you have Tor browser as your default browser. And that way, if you ever get a malicious link in your Thunderbird email, keep in mind this tutorial is for people who are not using specialty operating systems like Cubes, or rather Unix or Tails, because those already automate Torifying everything on those operating systems. Tails a great option for those. Check out my previous tutorials on Tails. We'll be covering it again, and I covered Unix as well in a couple videos, so take a look at those videos if you're interested in that. But if you have a normal Linux desktop, this video is for you. This video is for those who are setting things up on their daily driver that may not run a specialty operating system. So you'll want to go into the default applications just to prevent making a mistake, clicking a link on accident. Instead of making that direct connection, that would completely de-anonymize somebody on I2P mail. If they didn't have the SOX proxy Tor settings, that is, or you can even work on creating another type of avenue for connecting as well. But Tor is the easiest. That's the quickest, easiest way to add safety to it. So we have our default mail reader. We have our default browser. This will ensure any links in our, whether it's our Thunderbird emails or it's something else. And if it connects from within Thunderbird, it's already proxied through the Tor network if you followed my recent instructions just a couple minutes back. So make sure you have Tor browser as your system-wide default browser. That ensures that anytime you get a link, it's going to open it. If it has to use an outside browser, it's going to open it in Tor browser. Really important to do that if you care about your safety in email. Of course, we are also going to talk about the fact that if you have a webmail, for instance, you will want to use either Tor browser or, now here's another thing, you may want to use an I2P based browser. I worked on a setup called I2P Desktop that helps automate the starting and stopping of I2P mail, comes with a custom profile, but there's also another option out there. You can check out IDK's repositories, has some work with different things like private profiles for I2P. So I do want to bring attention to one of the main I2P developers, at least for the Java version, and they have made some things, including a automated Thunderbird I2P mail setup. So you can check that out. If you don't want to follow my whole tutorial, you can check out some of their work, and that could be useful to you. Make sure to check out my I2P Plus tutorial. I2P Plus comes with the out proxies configured, so you can even use your web-based mail inside an I2P browser setup because of the fact that it proxies the out proxy connection to the ClearNet. You're able to actually check your email through an I2P based mail setup. You can even read the blog there. You may notice, I'm really bummed out about this, is that what happened is my blog that I am running on this page here, it actually allowed Tor visitors when I first started it. Now, a couple years later, of course, Cloudflare steps in and block the Tor users. So that really sucks for me, losing the Tor browser users. So I don't know what I may do about that. But for the meantime, I do want to say you can actually visit it on the I2P browser setup. So you can actually read the blog and everything else from an I2P based setup. Now make sure you check out my videos on I2P. I do go over some of the things that you want to keep in mind for I2P safety, or you could use IDK's profile, or you could use the profile I include in the I2P desktop. So back to Thunderbird, I want to talk a bit more about Thunderbird because there's more to consider here. With your connection to the internet, of course, like said, make sure you set up the SOX proxy for Tor. No matter who your email provider is, you want to ensure that all your connections are going to be done through Thunderbird, through Tor as well. And if you have the I2P mail set up, that's not going to harm that because it's unrelated. Your I2P mail setup is going to use localhost as well through a different port. And when you set up proxy settings in something like Firefox or Thunderbird, they don't actually proxy the local host connection through an outside party because of the fact that it uses localhost. It doesn't interfere with anything in our proxy settings because those are not proxied. So back to privacy security, let's go ahead and take a look at some of these other settings. You may want to send take off accept cookies from sites possibly. You may not want to remember sites or links I visited. Disable allow remote content in messages. That's really important. I've done some videos on this and I actually shared a script. I think it's on the Gidea Onion. It was something like Honey Call Home, and what it did was it was a demonstration of remote content in an email where a remotely hosted image would load in that email and that would de-anonymize the user. So if somebody had allow remote content in messages and got one of those emails, they think it's just a simple picture in the email, but it turns out it is more than that, and it's doing a direct remote connection. And that's why you also not only disable allow remote content, you also set up that Tor connection to proxy all your Thunderbird settings through Tor when it's doing something outside of the mail sending and receiving. So for those who are I2P mail users, they don't have to worry about it interfering with that because it is not going to affect localhost on any of this. And that is that. Let's talk a little bit about PGP. So you want to have PGP. If you want end-to-end encryption in your emails, you'll want to have Open PGP setup. I've done tutorials on that. Actually, I've done 2 tutorials on setting that up. One on Onion Mail, which is a Torified Onion-based email service, and then also on the I2P Mail, SUSE Mail setup. So you may want to export your keys to another device. You can actually do that. There's a couple ways you can do that. One way, you could actually back up your secret key, so never share your secret key with anyone. That's another email safety tip. You want to export your public key. Anyone you're talking to is going to need your public key if you set up end-to-end encryption. So you're going to want to export your public key to a file, and you can share that with the world. And you can also have it publish that key. Ensure you always proxy your settings in Thunderbird through the Tor network, just to add that extra bit of safety in case there's any kind of outside connection, in case you accidentally load remote content, in case it's automatically set without your knowledge. So that's another reason you set the proxying, so you can generate your own PGP keys for email on Thunderbird. So that's very convenient, very nice. And I'm also setting up the same on my PinePhone. I have the Thunderbird set up. I did a video talking about PGP on the PinePhone, and I also have an Android which I'm using to record videos on this channel, as some of my outside work depends on a high quality camera, and so I've had to acquire an Android. Not only that, but my PinePhone screen broke, which I'm going to get a replacement of. Just got to see how things go. Make sure you set up PGP. So if you're doing an email and they don't have PGP, they can set one up in Thunderbird. Or if you're communicating with someone at a Proton Mail address, you can actually get their public key online. If you are talking to someone at Proton Mail, make sure you take advantage of the PGP option there and acquire their public key, and you can communicate that way as well. I hope this video has been helpful to you. I wanted to talk about the most important things you can do to make your email more safe. And this is for those who aren't using Cubes, who aren't using Hunix, who are not using Tails. Because with Tails, with Hunix, those options have great safety features built in, but there's going to be a lot of times when we're not going to want to use something that takes so many restrictions and prevents you from getting work done efficiently. So that's why I don't always use a Tails machine. I don't always use a Unix or Cubes machine. On your local computer, your daily driver that is not a specialty operating system, you're going to want to ensure that you use the tips that I've shared today to make your email safer. So thank you guys so much for sharing this video. Really appreciate it. It makes a big difference when you share a link, helps move the channel up in the rankings. And I really want to thank those who have taken the time to join a coffee membership. It's just a small $5 to join a month, and it really helps out the channel. It also tells me I'm doing something right, so I really appreciate those who have done that. And if you can share this video anywhere, really appreciate that. That'll help the channel out. I'm always coming out with some new stuff, and I'm always working on something new. So help support the blog by sharing this video. Make sure to like it. Leave a comment or question. Always am looking for your feedback. So if you like something on the channel, let me know. What did you like so I know what people are watching? I really appreciate that. I will be back with more on how to protect your security and privacy.